we learned about that, how your early dates influence your writing, and also we learned about, of course, how your father's doings, how it influenced your screenwriting. But you had a very respectful career as a journalist before you started screenwriting. I remember...
I'm not sure that journalism is ever a respectful career, but I did do it for many years.
Yeah, well, so I remember that Tom Wolfe edited the book on new journalism, and you were part of that anthology. Yes. And so I just want to ask that how your journalism influenced your screenwriting. And I would have a follow-up question as well. You were a writer for the Rolling Stone magazine at its golden age in the 1970s. So you were a colleague and probably a friend also of the late Hunter S. Thompson. How would you react on the film adaptations of his work, Rum Diary, which was a recent one, or Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or the earliest one, Where the Buffalo Roam?
To start with Hunter and then Rolling Stone first, I think he's had bad luck with his work being... I loved Hunter, and one of the reasons that I went to Rolling Stone was because of Hunter. I'd written an article for a newspaper in Cleveland that Hunter read, and he wrote me a note that said, it was about motorcycle gangs, he wrote me a note that said, "Damn you, now there are two of us who can write about motorcycle gangs." But at the same time, he said to Jan Wenner, hire this guy, I think he's a talented guy. First time I saw Hunter after I went to San Francisco was it was a Rolling Stone party, and he was sitting on the floor, and he was bare-chested. And he had the biggest hypodermic needle that I've ever seen. He was pushing it into his navel, right? He's got it halfway in. He's still working on it. I said, "Hunter, I'm Joe." He said, "Hold on, I'm busy." Right, and again to finish funny. He's a grand character. He's larger than life. He had a surprisingly good heart, and he was a very sweet man, hugely talented man. But the movie stuff hasn't been very good, part of the problem, I think, Johnny Depp loves Hunter and spent a lot of time with Hunter, and was very involved in Hunter's life, and I think the only way to do a movie about Hunter or to write about him is to write about him even by those who loved him as a human being with foibles and failures and very human and very odd. And I think some of these treatments are way too reverential. The very first time that I had a meeting with my long and fabled agent, Guy McElwain, I was at the ICM building in LA, and I was waiting for Guy who was a half hour overdue, and here comes this guy with a bag on his shoulder and a little safari hat and shorts, Hawaiian shirt, and it's Hunter. And he says, "What the fuck are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm waiting to talk to this agent." He said, "Oh, well." He said, "Do you have any beer?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm just waiting." He reaches into the satchel and he takes out a Heineken and pops it. He said, "You want one?" I said, "Sure, thank you." "Okay, very nice of you." "Okay." He said, "Well, that'll help." He said, "You need anything else?" He said, "Well, I said, no, I'm cool. I'm waiting to meet you." I said, "Yeah. You need some dope?" I've got, he went through his whole list of stuff. He was truly a grand character. He had a very sad ending. I think he was painfully lonely near the end of his life. But he was a journalistic pioneer and a genius, and he changed the entire course, I think, and I don't think I'm over-dramatizing, of American journalism, which has not always been such a respectable career, and that Hunter really changed it single-handedly.
And your journalistic experience, how did
I alluded to it yesterday. It made a great deal of difference for me because I didn't know the language. I knew the language by this time, but I didn't know the American world very well. I was an immigrant and spent most of my early years in immigrant circles. Journalism forced me into the American world to go into different situations and to talk to people. I was also a relatively shy kid, very shy kid, and that helped overcome that as well. But the notion that you go into all aspects of American life, politics and crime, on all class levels, and you go into people's homes and talk to them and ask questions, that was only possible because of my journalism, and it made me able to write about different things, even in screenplay form later on in my life.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you actually yesterday a little bit more about characters. Early on, the beginning of your career, which was your favorite writers, like novelists, let's say?
My favorite writers in Hollywood?
No, novelists.
Novelists.
Novelists, okay.
Or anybody whose characters or storyline you liked and enjoyed.
I'm going to limit this to a short list because I always forget people, you know, and I don't like to do that. I like Joan Didion very much. I like Hemingway, but I think there are dangers. You can get so addicted to him that you could become like a Hemingway addict, and it's going to affect your writing. You know, I mean, it's like you want to shoot him up, tie up, and shoot him up, and you shouldn't do that. It's unhealthy for you. I like Steinbeck, especially Grapes of Wrath. I like Thomas Wolfe, not Tom Wolfe, but the Thomas Wolfe who wrote in the 30s and 40s. I like Faulkner very much. I like Cormac McCarthy. I like this guy who wrote Savages, Don Winslow, who's done a series of books that I think are very interesting, and I'm going to stop there. Yeah.
Did you ever get the possibility, or did you ever consider directing one of your scripts?
No, I was asked. I was seriously asked on the odd movie about sacred cows, about the President of the United States having a relationship with the cow. Steven Spielberg came on to that initially as a producer, and he loved the script, and he thought about directing it, but he said he was frightened to direct it without some support, so he sent it to Stanley Kubrick to direct or to produce. And Kubrick wrote a note back saying, you know, I think this is one of the funniest things I've read, but I don't want to get within 10,000 miles of it. No, thank you. Then we went to Milos Forman, and I did a draft for Milos. And Milos said that he showed the script to his friend Václav Havel, and Havel said, "This is really funny, but you're crazy to do this. Please don't do this." So anyway, in the course of all of that, in 1993, Steven called me when we were living in Malibu, and at that point he had talked to Tony Bill about directing it. And he called me and he said, "You know what? You should direct this yourself." And I said, "Well, I've never been, you know," and then I'd known him before. He said, "I'd never been interested in directing because I feel there's a very different talent in writing, and I'm a writer." He said, "I know, but you should really do this. I'll produce it, and I'll help you, and we can make this work." I was tempted. That's the only time I was tempted. I had just met Naomi. I was just in the course of, we had a brand new relationship. I was going through a divorce, and I realized, and I knew by that time, that if you direct something, you're going to be on that set 10 hours at least a day. You're never going to be at home. Your life is going to be transformed, and I didn't want my life to change that way, you know. And I was very afraid that it would hurt our relationship because there had been this explosive relationship and this divorce, and suddenly I wasn't going to be there for 3 months, you know. So we went through a very long line of people who loved that script and were interested in directing it. Blake Edwards was one, and Edward James Olmos was another. They a whole series of people, but we never found the right one. And then actually, when I wrote it, the producer that I worked with, Irwin Winkler, you know, and he and I had done 2 movies, said, "This is really funny, but no one's ever going to make this movie." And he was right, going back then.
I have an analytical question again.
about timing. You said that it happened to you once with the 420 pages script, that you sort of got carried away, and I think it happens to everyone beginning or practicing screenwriters, that they just start writing a scene and they get carried away, and it just goes on. You fall in love with the characters and how they talk and walk. And I know you're not, I gathered by now that you're not an analytical person, but how do you keep, how do you constrain yourself to, you have to end up with a script with the 100 and 120 pages, but in the process of writing, you obviously, you have to sort of keep track of time and how many pages. So when you start writing a scene, do you know that it's going to be a 1.5 page, 2 page scene, or you just keep going and then, take it back a little bit? So what's your technique for?
I keep going and then cut down. Also at this point, and I guess much earlier than now, and I did learn Jewison's lesson, which was to see it up on screen. Less is more. Listen to every piece of dialogue on screen comes at you almost as some kind of explosion. If you have all of these words going all the time, it's too much. It's not going to work. And write in some ways. Try to write, or at least try to see what you've written through your ear. That's a correct way to put it. To see what you've written through your ear, so that you're hearing these words explode. On the page, you write these words and they're quiet. But on screen they explode at you, and it's too much. It's overdone. Now, the first draft that you turn in, excuse me, should be around 100 or 120, right? That's good. But that's the first draft you turn in. If your first draft is 200, you can keep cutting back and redoing, and bringing it down and bringing it down. And it can very well work that way. That's happened to me. Where it's,
so what you mean is you don't mind with your first draft, we're talking about your personal first draft,
right.
You just keep going. This is a long scene, but you will cut it back.
I would suggest to you keep going and then trim it down. Don't go up to 400. That's bad. But if you go to 200, it's cool. But then start trimming it down.
Egy kérdés még. Mit gondol emberként és filmkészítőként, vagy mit gondolt Mel Gibsonról a Makabeus előtt és a Makabeus után?
So what am I thinking before and after the Maccabees? But what was the question? Mel Gibson. Oh, what do I think about Mel? Well, I thought one of the reasons I got involved in the project is because I thought it was a great idea. The Maccabees is a wonderful, stirring story and a great part of Jewish history. Judea has been invaded by the Greeks and the Syrians, and they've stopped the Jews from even being able to pray, let alone be educated. And they've taken the country over by terror, by the ugliest kinds of terror. There's a king named Antiochus who was a Hitler-like figure and truly ugly figure. And this family, the Maccabees, led by a rabbinical kind of figure named Mattathias, and his oldest son, Judah, rise up against this and collect an army of farmers, essentially, and peasants, who wind up building up the greater and greater numbers. And they defied the Greeks and the Syrians, and they ultimately beat them out of the country for a period of time, as did the Hungarians with the Russians from the 23rd of October to November 4th. This time frame is much bigger, but it's that kind of stirring human spirit story, right? Mel came to me and said, "Let's do this," and I thought it was a great idea. I did ask him very seriously, and so did the studio heads, considering some of the reputed anti-Semitic statements that he had said. We said to him, "Why do you want to do this?" And the response that he said was, "Because I think I should." We took that, by we I mean me and Jeff Rabinoff, who's the head of Warner Brothers, and Vogelson, who's the head of Universal, as meaning okay, I want to do a kind of penance, for the things I may have said. I got involved in it. I did a terrific amount of research with it. I loved every part of the research because it was biblical and Hebrew and very strong stuff. Because I've told you this morning about my own very personal reasons for doing this kind of story. I did 2 others about anti-Semitism, and this was going to be a great, stirring Jewish story. So I took great pride in doing it. As I began working with it, I was disquieted by several of the things that he said. He said he wanted this to be a story where the Jews convert to Christianity. In my mind, this was a Jewish story, not a Christian story. He said that the figure of Judas Maccabee in his mind was a prefigurement of Jesus Christ. I didn't see any part in this with Jesus Christ. Then we had more specific anti-Semitic incidents. He said that the Torah, he claimed that the Torah said that the Jews sacrificed Christian babies and infants and put their blood on their altars. And I said, well, that's absolute and complete horseshit, and he said, but he insisted this was true. And then his sister finally admitted that maybe the book this came from was the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is one of the most anti-Semitic, scurrilous books ever written. We had a series of these fights, and it became obvious to me that I had a problem in terms of the script that I wanted to write and the script that he wanted written. We went to Costa Rica with my wife and my son Nick, and I witnessed an explosive and scary incident of utter and crazed rage, where the staffers in his house told the kids to hide and go to another house because he went on a completely insane rampage, both physical and verbal. We were supposed to go to his house in Malibu after Costa Rica, and I just decided I didn't want to have anything more to do with this, so we went back home. You probably know the rest of it in terms of how it ended. I wrote him a letter, and I said, give me the project, because you're never going to do this project right if you do it, and I suspect you're not going to do it because I think essentially you're building up a publicity campaign in order to get rid of these anti-Semitic charges against you. There was no way he was going to do that, of course. I wrote him a letter demanding it back, and we wound up in a totally full-blown nuclear exchange that was very public. What I think of him now is that he is an absolute anti-Semite. He is a hater. He had nothing but hateful things to say about every person that he'd worked with. He needs help, serious medical help. And I think if he doesn't get it, something really bad is going to happen in terms of the violence within the man and the violence that he projected, not only toward all of us who were there in Costa Rica, but also against his former girlfriend, the Russian girlfriend, Oksana, with whom he is obsessed. It was a terrible experience in the sense that I fell in love with this story, and I really wanted to do this story, and in my mind I wrote a really terrific script. I just picked the wrong person to do it with. There's nothing that I can do about the script because the deal that I made was with Warner Brothers and with Mel's company, and he came to me to suggest it. So they own it, they have it, and I found it heartbreaking. So these things happen, but this happened in a particularly ugly way that I didn't expect.